I am standing in my hotel room in Denver, looking out at the Rocky Mountains turning purple in the evening light, when my phone rings. It is my son Brian. His voice cracks before he even says hello. "Dad, she went into the basement and found everything. Stephanie is losing her mind. She is threatening to call the police, the media, everyone." "Dad, what do I do?" I take a slow breath, setting down my coffee cup carefully on the desk. My hands are steady. I have been preparing for this exact moment for 6 months, ever since Brian announced he was marrying Stephanie Turner. The woman I knew was after one thing: my money. Let me back up 6 months so you understand how we got here. My name is Claude Henderson. I am 67 years old, a retired structural engineer who spent 40 years designing bridges and commercial buildings across Ohio. I live in a modest 3-bedroom house in suburban Columbus. Nothing fancy, but paid off completely. I have been a widower for 8 years now, ever since my wife Martha lost her battle with cancer. She was only 56. Brain cancer, the doctors said. 6 months from diagnosis to goodbye. I still cannot walk past her favorite coffee shop without feeling that hollow ache in my chest. I raised Brian alone, from the time he was 24 onward. He was finishing graduate school when Martha died, studying to become a teacher. It nearly broke him. They were incredibly close. For months after the funeral, he would call me at 2 in the morning just to talk because he could not sleep. I would stay on the phone with him until sunrise sometimes, both of us just existing together in our grief. Eventually, he finished his degree. He became a high school chemistry teacher at Westbrook High, 15 minutes from my house. He is good at it, really good. His students love him. He makes $47,000 a year, has a small apartment, drives a 12-year-old Honda Civic that rattles when it goes over 50 miles per hour. He is happy, or at least he was, until he met Stephanie. The basement in my house has been locked since Brian was a child. When he was young, maybe 7 or 8, he would ask about it constantly. "Dad, what is down there? Can I see? Why is it locked?" I always deflected. "Just old storage, buddy. Some of my work equipment. Nothing interesting. Dangerous tools, sharp things, not safe for kids." As he got older, he stopped asking. It just became part of the house, that locked door at the end of the hallway. Something we stepped past without thinking about it. 3 months before the wedding, Brian brought Stephanie home for dinner. It was a Thursday evening in March, still cold enough that I had the heat running. I made pot roast, the way Martha used to make it, with carrots and potatoes and that rich brown gravy. Brian had told me he was seeing someone, that it was getting serious. He seemed nervous when they arrived, fidgeting with his car keys, laughing too loud at things that were not funny. Stephanie Turner walked into my house like she was evaluating real estate. She is 28 years old. Brian is 32. She has that polished look some women cultivate, perfectly styled blonde hair, designer clothes that look expensive even to someone like me who does not know anything about fashion, manicured nails, flawless makeup. She works as what she called a lifestyle consultant, whatever that means. When I asked her to explain her job, she waved her hand vaguely and said she helps people optimize their personal brand. I still do not know what that means. During dinner, she asked me more questions about my finances than about my life. "How long have you lived in this house, Claude? It must be worth quite a bit now with property values in this neighborhood. Do you still do consulting work? I heard engineers have excellent retirement packages. Have you thought about downsizing now that you are alone? This house is so big for one person." I answered politely but vaguely. Brian did not seem to notice how invasive the questions were. He was too busy watching her with this look of complete adoration that made my stomach turn. After dinner, Stephanie excused herself to use the bathroom. I was in the kitchen loading the dishwasher when I heard it, the distinct rattle of a doorknob being tested. I walked quietly into the hallway and saw her standing at the basement door, her hand on the handle, turning it back and forth. The door did not open, of course. It has had a deadbolt lock on it for 30 years. She jumped when she saw me, laughed this high, artificial laugh. "Oh, I was just looking for the bathroom. These old houses, so many doors." I pointed her to the actual bathroom, 3 doors down, clearly marked. She smiled and thanked me, but I saw something in her eyes. Calculation. Interest. She had not been looking for the bathroom at all. Over the next 2 months, Brian became distant. He stopped coming over for our weekly dinners. Always had an excuse. "Stephanie does not feel well. We have plans with her friends. We are just really busy right now, Dad." When he did call, his voice had this defensive edge to it, like he was waiting for me to criticize him. I did not understand it until I started paying closer attention. I hired a private investigator, a woman named Teresa Mendoza, who came highly recommended. I am not proud of it, but I needed to know who my son was tangling his life up with. Teresa came back 3 weeks later with a file 2 inches thick. Stephanie Turner had been engaged twice before, once to a man named Gerald Porter, a 62-year-old dentist, once to Marcus Wright, a 55-year-old real estate developer. Both relationships ended within a year. Both men were substantially older and wealthier than Brian. I contacted Gerald Porter. He agreed to meet me for coffee at a Starbucks downtown. He is a soft-spoken man with tired eyes. He told me everything. Stephanie moved in with him after 3 months of dating. She was sweet at first, he said, affectionate, attentive. Then she suggested he add her name to his house title, just for security. She told him, "In case something happens to you, I want to make sure I am protected." He did it because he loved her. 2 months later, she broke off the engagement, claimed irreconcilable differences, and threatened to force a sale of the house unless he bought out her half. He paid her $250,000 to make her go away. His lawyer told him it was cheaper than fighting it in court. I felt sick listening to him. This was the woman my son wanted to marry. I tried talking to Brian. I invited him over, sat him down, told him gently that I had concerns about Stephanie, that I had heard some things about her past, that maybe they should slow down and really get to know each other before making such a big commitment. He exploded. I stood there for a long time, looking around at Martha's old holiday decorations, boxes of Christmas lights and Halloween decorations and Easter baskets. I had told Brian it was work equipment when he was a kid because I did not want him getting into things and breaking Martha's precious collection. She had loved decorating for every holiday, had spent years accumulating all of it. After she died, I could not bear to throw any of it away, so I locked it all down here, where I would not have to see it every day. But now, the basement was going to serve a different purpose. I spent the next 2 weeks transforming it. I moved everything out, all of Martha's decorations, took them to a storage unit across town. I had the basement completely emptied. I installed 4 hidden cameras, small and undetectable, one in each corner of the ceiling. I set up a single table in the center of the room. On that table, I placed a laptop, a thick document, and an envelope with Stephanie's name written on it in black marker. Then I visited my lawyer, Donald Shaw. Donald has handled my legal affairs for 20 years. He is a meticulous man who wears bow ties and keeps his office obsessively organized. I sat across from his mahogany desk and told him what I needed. He listened without interrupting, his fingers steepled under his chin. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Claude, this is a bit unorthodox. Are you sure?" "I am sure," I told him. He nodded and got to work. 2 weeks later, my estate planning was completely restructured. The new will was ironclad, notarized, filed with the county. Everything was in place. The wedding was small, 70 people at a hotel ballroom. I wore my best suit, the charcoal gray one Martha had picked out for me 10 years ago. I smiled through the ceremony, shook hands during the reception, gave a short toast wishing them happiness. Stephanie was radiant in her white dress, all smiles and laughter. She pulled me aside at one point, placed her hand on my arm. "Claude, I know we got off on the wrong foot. I really do love Brian. I hope we can be a real family." Her eyes were warm, sincere. If I had not known what I knew, I might have believed her. 1 week after they returned from their honeymoon in Cancun, I had a new lock installed on the basement door. High security, electronic, requiring a 6-digit code. No key override. The locksmith, a guy named Tom who had done work for me before, installed it in under an hour. "Looks like you are protecting Fort Knox down there," he joked. "Just want to keep my stuff secure," I told him. "Getting older, you know, more cautious about break-ins." Brian mentioned that Stephanie thought I should help them with a down payment on a house. "She says it is not fair that you have this whole house to yourself and we are paying rent," he told me over coffee one afternoon. I kept my voice neutral. "Your mother and I worked 40 years for what we have, son. You need to build your own life, your own equity." He nodded but looked uncomfortable. Then Stephanie started making comments whenever she came over. "This house is so empty with just you, Claude. Have you ever thought about getting a roommate? Or maybe moving into a smaller place and giving this one to Brian and me? We could take care of it. Really make it a family home again." I smiled and changed the subject every time. That is when I planned my trip. I told my old firm I was available for a week-long consulting job in Denver. They were thrilled. They had a commercial project that needed my expertise. I mentioned it to Brian casually over the phone. I will be gone next Tuesday through the following Monday. Out in Colorado. Stephanie was there when I said it. I could hear her in the background. Her voice got suddenly bright. Brian, tell your dad we can check on the house while he is gone. Brian relayed the message. I protested mildly. That is not necessary, really. But Stephanie insisted. She got on the phone herself. No, Claude, we insist. We can water your plants, get your mail, make sure everything is secure. It would make us feel better knowing the house is not just sitting empty. I paused like I was considering it, then agreed. All right, if it makes you feel better. I will leave a key under the back mat. Before I left for the airport, I did a final check of everything. All 4 cameras were operational, feeding directly to an app on my phone. The basement lock was programmed with a special feature that Tom, the locksmith, had set up for me. If someone entered the wrong code 3 times, it would trigger a silent alarm to my phone and activate the audio recording system inside the basement. Everything was ready. I flew to Denver on a Tuesday morning. The consulting work was legitimate, but it was also the perfect cover. I checked into my hotel, the Marriott downtown, and settled into the routine of meetings and site visits, but I kept my phone close at all times, the security app open in the background. Waiting. 3 days into my trip, on a Thursday afternoon, I was in my hotel room reviewing blueprints when my phone buzzed. Motion detected at front door. I opened the security app and watched the live feed. Stephanie was letting herself in through the front door. She was alone. Brian was at school, teaching. It was 2:15 in the afternoon. She was wearing gloves, black latex gloves like someone cleaning a house might wear, but the house was not dirty. She walked through the living room, glanced around quickly, then headed straight down the hallway toward the basement door. No hesitation. She knew exactly where she was going. I watched her examine the electronic lock, running her gloved fingers over the keypad. She pulled out her phone, typed something, then started entering codes. First attempt, 031789, Brian's birthday, March 17, 89. The lock beeped red, wrong. Second attempt, 082396, her birthday, August 23, 96. Beep. Wrong. Third attempt. 4729. My house number. Beep. Wrong. My phone vibrated with the silent alarm. Audio recording activated. I switched to the basement camera feed and turned up the volume. Stephanie was pacing in front of the door now. Phone pressed to her ear. Amanda. I cannot get it open. The lock is more sophisticated than we thought. She paused, listening. Yes. I am sure there is something valuable down there. He was so secretive about it. And he is a retired engineer who lived frugally his whole life. People like that hoard assets. Another pause. Then her voice dropped lower. No. Brian is at work. He does not know I am here. He would never approve of this. My jaw clenched. She had planned this, coordinated it. This was not some impulsive curiosity. It was calculated theft. 20 minutes later, a white van pulled up outside. A man got out carrying a tool bag. He was maybe 40, heavy build, wearing a shirt that said Rick's Lock and Key Service. Stephanie met him at the door. Thanks for coming on short notice, Rick. He nodded. No problem, ma'am. You said this was your father-in-law's house, and he forgot his code? That is right. Stephanie lied smoothly. He is elderly, getting a bit forgetful. We have permission to access the basement for important family documents. My husband and I are joint owners of the property. Every word a fabrication. Rick went to work on the lock. I watched him for 30 minutes as he used various tools, testing the mechanism, trying to bypass the electronic system. Finally, he stood up, wiping his forehead. This is commercial-grade security, top of the line. I can override it, but it will damage the mechanism. Are you certain you want me to proceed? It will cost at least $800 to replace. Stephanie did not hesitate. Do it. 5 minutes later, the lock clicked open. The damaged mechanism hung loose from the door. Rick collected his tools. That will be $250 for the emergency call and the override work. Stephanie paid him in cash. Rick left, and Stephanie stood at the top of the basement stairs, staring down into the darkness. She flipped the light switch. Fluorescent lights flickered on below. She descended slowly, one step at a time. The camera inside the basement caught every moment. She reached the bottom and stopped. Her face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, then growing anger. The basement was completely empty except for the table in the center. She walked toward it slowly, her heels clicking on the concrete floor. She picked up the envelope with her name on it. Her hands were shaking slightly as she tore it open. She pulled out the letter and started reading. I had written it myself 2 months ago. Every word carefully chosen. Dear Stephanie, if you are reading this, you have broken into my home and destroyed property to access this basement without permission. The laptop on this table contains video footage of everything you just did, including your phone conversation with Amanda about stealing from me. It also contains documentation of your past relationships with Gerald Porter and Marcus Wright, including the fraud you committed against Gerald. The legal document next to the laptop is a restraining order, pre-filed with Franklin County Court, requiring only my signature to activate. You now have 2 choices. Choice 1. Leave immediately, file for divorce from Brian within 30 days, and disappear from our lives. If you do this, I will not press charges for breaking and entering, destruction of property, and attempted theft. Choice 2. Refuse, and I will activate the restraining order, press all charges, and provide all evidence to the police and the media. This laptop will automatically upload everything to the Franklin County Sheriff's Office in exactly 2 hours unless I enter a cancel code remotely. You are not a criminal yet, Stephanie, but you are very close to becoming one. Choose wisely. P.S. There never was any valuable equipment. I just needed to know who you really were. Stephanie stood there holding the letter, reading it twice. Her face had gone pale. Then she grabbed the laptop, opened it, and watched herself on the screen. The video of her hiring Rick, lying about being a property owner, paying him to break the lock. The audio of her phone call with Amanda. All of it. She tried to close the laptop, but it was locked. Password protected. She tried to unplug it, but it was running on battery. She looked around frantically, as if searching for something to smash it with, but the basement was empty. Just concrete walls. The table. The camera she did not know was there. That is when my phone rang. Brian. His name lit up my screen. I answered. Dad, she went into the basement and found something. She is freaking out. What is going on? I kept my voice calm, even though my heart was pounding. Brian, where are you right now? I am leaving school, driving to your house. Stephanie called me crying, said something about a threatening letter, and she is scared, and I need to get there right away. She said your basement door was open and there was this insane letter inside, like some psycho planted it there. Good, I said. Brian, I need you to sit down and listen to me. I know you are driving, so pull over when you can. I need to tell you something and you are not going to like it. What are you talking about? His voice was rising, panicked. I explained everything, not harshly, not accusatorially, just factually. I told him about Gerald Porter, about the research I had done, about Stephanie trying the basement door the first night she came to my house. I told him about the cameras, the trap, the letter. I told him I had been trying to protect him. Silence on the other end. Long, terrible silence. Then his voice, barely a whisper. You set up my wife? I set up a test, I corrected. She failed, Brian. She broke into my home, hired a locksmith to break my property, tried to steal what she thought were valuable assets. She lied to the locksmith and said she was a co-owner of my house. This was not some misunderstanding. This was planned. More silence. I could hear his turn signal clicking in the background, the sound of him pulling over. I did not know what else to say, so I waited. I am at your house now, he finally said, his voice hollow. His car door slammed. I heard his footsteps on my front walkway, the sound of the door opening. Stephanie? He called out. His voice echoed in my empty house through his phone. In here, I heard her say from somewhere distant. The kitchen, probably. Her voice was thick with tears, real or manufactured, I could not tell. What happened? Brian asked. I could hear the confusion in his voice, the desperation to believe this was all some mistake. Stephanie launched into her version immediately. I came to check on the house like we promised, and the basement door was just hanging open, broken, and there was this horrible letter down there, accusing me of things and threatening me. Brian, it is terrifying, like someone broke in here and planted it. We need to call the police. Brian, I said into the phone, still connected, still listening. Check the laptop. The password is Martha's birthday. Month, day, year. All numbers, no spaces. I heard rustling, movement. Stephanie's voice rising in pitch. What are you doing? Brian, we should not touch anything. This could be evidence. Do not listen to your father. He is trying to manipulate you. The password is 04121973, I said clearly. Tell him to open the video folder. More silence. Then a clicking sound. The laptop opening. Keys being pressed. Then I heard it. Stephanie's voice coming through the laptop speakers, tinny but clear. Amanda, I cannot get it open. The lock is more sophisticated than we thought. Then her next words. No. Brian is at work. He does not know I am here. He would never approve of this. Brian, she said quickly. That is not what it sounds like. I can explain everything. You told Amanda I would not approve, Brian said slowly, like he was testing the words in his mouth. You knew I would not want you doing this. So you waited until I was at work. I was worried about your father. I thought maybe something was wrong. I was trying to help. Then why did you pay a locksmith to break the lock? Why did you tell him you were a co-owner of my dad's house? I heard the video playing more. Rick's voice asking if she was sure. Stephanie saying do it. The sound of the lock breaking. The line went quiet except for Stephanie's crying. But it had changed now. Less theatrical, more desperate. Brian, please, you have to understand. Your father has been trying to break us up from the beginning. Specifically, the Martha Henderson Memorial Scholarship Fund for children of single parents pursuing teaching degrees. Brian inherits nothing while married. Brian's voice cracked on the last words. You changed your will. I did, I confirmed, the day after you told me you were engaged. I heard Stephanie inhale sharply. Then she laughed, high and brittle. You bastard! You manipulative, controlling bastard! You planned this whole thing. I gave you a choice, I said, even though she probably could not hear me through Brian's phone. You could have chosen to respect my home and my privacy. Instead, you chose to break in and try to steal. Stephanie was not crying anymore. Her voice was pure venom now. Fine. You want the truth, Brian? Your father is worth over $2 million. He owns this house free and clear, has a pension, has investments, and you? You are a high school teacher making nothing. I am 28 years old. I am not going to spend the rest of my life struggling because you are content being mediocre. There it was. The mask completely off. Then why did you marry me? Brian's voice was so quiet I almost could not hear it. Because I figured I could wait you out. Be the good wife for a few years, until the old man died. Then we could finally have a real life. But he ruined it. He ruined everything. The phone line was completely silent. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. Then Brian spoke, and his voice was not sad anymore. It was something else. Something harder. Get out of my father's house. Brian, wait. We can fix this. We can talk about this. Stephanie's voice shifted again, back to pleading. I did not mean it like that. I am just upset. I am not thinking clearly. Get out, Brian repeated. Or I am calling the police, and you can explain to them why you hired someone to break into a house you do not own. I heard footsteps, a door slamming, then just Brian's breathing, ragged and uneven. Dad, are you still there? I am here, son. I need you to come home. I cannot do this alone. I am catching the first flight out. I will be there by midnight. Do not leave the house. We need to talk face to face. Okay, he said, and his voice broke on the word. I am so stupid. I am so unbelievably stupid. No, I said firmly. You are human. You wanted to believe in love. She exploited that. Those are two very different things. He did not respond, but he did not hang up either. So I stayed on the line with him, just like I used to after Martha died when he could not sleep. I stayed connected while I threw clothes in my bag, while I booked an emergency flight on my laptop, while I checked out of the hotel. I stayed on the line during the entire cab ride to the airport, through security, right up until I had to board the plane. It is going to be okay, I told him before hanging up. I promise you, son, it is going to be okay. But I was not sure I believed it. I landed in Columbus just before midnight, drove straight from the airport to my house, did not even stop to process what had happened. All I could think about was getting to Brian. The porch light was on when I pulled into the driveway. Through the front window, I could see him sitting at the kitchen table, exactly where I had left him 6 hours ago, probably not having moved. I let myself in quietly. Brian looked up when I entered, His eyes were red, exhausted. I sat down across from him without saying anything. We stayed like that for several minutes, just existing in the same space. "Was any of it real?" he finally asked. His voice was hoarse, like he had been crying or maybe just silent for too long. "That is the worst part, Dad. I will never know where the truth ended and the performance began. I do not know, son. I wish I could tell you. That is the cruelty of people like Stephanie. They make you doubt everything, even the good moments. I thought I was building something. A family. Like you and Mom had." He looked at me with such pain in his eyes that I felt it in my chest like a physical thing. "Your mother and I had 24 years together," I said carefully. "We built it slowly, honestly. You tried to rush something with someone who was never really there. That is not your fault. She was skilled at making people believe in her. When did you know? For certain. The first dinner. When she tried the basement door. Nobody just wanders to a locked basement door by accident in a house they have never been in before. People look for bathrooms in logical places. They do not test locked doors in hallways." He nodded slowly, processing. Then he looked at me with something new in his expression. "Fear. How do I come back from this? Everyone at school knows I just got married 6 months ago. How do I walk back into that building and tell them I'm getting divorced? That my wife was only after money? That I was too stupid to see it? You tell them the truth. You made a mistake. You are fixing it. That is what adults do." But Brian was not listening. He was spiraling. I could see it happening. What if I can never trust anyone again? What if she broke something in me? What if I am just broken now and I will never be able to have what you and Mom had? I reached across the table and gripped his hand. He looked startled. I am not a physically demonstrative person. Never have been. But he needed to be anchored to something real. "Listen to me," I said. "Let me tell you something about your mother. When I met her, I had just been laid off from my first engineering job. I was 26 years old, broke, living in a studio apartment with a space heater that only worked half the time because the heating system was broken. It was January in Cleveland. Do you have any idea how cold that is?" Brian shook his head slightly. "Miserable. I wore 2 coats to bed. Your mother was a paralegal at a law firm downtown, making more money than I was even when I had a job. On our 3rd date, I had to tell her I could not afford to take her anywhere nice. I was humiliated, 26 years old, and could not even buy dinner for a woman I liked. You know what she said? 'What? Then let me make you dinner.' She showed up at my apartment the next night with 2 bags of groceries, made spaghetti on my one working burner. We ate on paper plates because I only owned 3 dishes and 2 of them were dirty in the sink. And she smiled the whole time like it was the finest restaurant in Cleveland. That is how I knew." "Knew what?" "That she saw me. Not my potential usefulness, not what I might become, not what I could provide. She saw me, struggling, and broke and embarrassed, and she chose to be there anyway. Stephanie never saw you, Brian. She saw a path to money through me. Those are completely different things." He was quiet for a long time, staring at our hands on the table. Then his phone rang. He looked at the screen and his face went white. "It is Donald Shaw. Your lawyer. Why is your lawyer calling me at 1 in the morning? Answer it," I said. "Put it on speaker." Brian accepted the call, pressed the speaker button. "Hello?" Donald Shaw's voice filled my kitchen, professional even at this hour. "Brian, is your father with you?" "Yes," Brian said. "I am here, Donald," I confirmed. "Good. You both need to hear this. Stephanie just showed up at my office building. I was working late, came down to the parking garage around 12:30 to head home. She was waiting by my car. I have no idea how she got past building security. My stomach dropped. What did she want? She offered me $50,000 to lose the paperwork on the updated will, to restore the previous version. When I refused, she tried to seduce me, put her hand on my chest, suggested we could work out a mutually beneficial arrangement. When that failed, she threatened me. Said she would claim Claude coerced Brian into the marriage specifically to control his life and inheritance. Said she would go to the media with a story about an abusive father manipulating his vulnerable son. Brian made a sound like he had been punched. "I have her on my dash camera," Donald continued. "All of it. The bribery attempt, the inappropriate contact, the threats. I have already filed a report with building security and I am going to the police in the morning. But there is something else you need to know. I ran the full background check you authorized, Claude. The deep one." "Go ahead," I said, bracing myself. Stephanie Turner is currently under investigation by the IRS for unreported income. She has been running an online catfishing operation for approximately 3 years. She creates fake profiles on dating sites, builds emotional connections with lonely men, then convinces them to send money for various fabricated emergencies. The federal investigators have been building a case. They have identified at least 11 victims who sent her amounts ranging from $5,000 to $40,000 each. Brian stood up so fast his chair fell backward. What? There is more. The IRS suspects she married Brian partially to establish legitimacy and deflect suspicion. A married woman with a husband who is a teacher looks stable, trustworthy. It provides cover for her activities. They have been monitoring her for 6 months, waiting to build a strong enough case. How do you know all this? Brian's voice was shaking. I have a contact at the IRS, a colleague from law school. When you asked me to run a comprehensive background check, I reached out to her. She was relieved someone in the family was looking into Stephanie's activities. She said they were worried Brian was another victim. Donald paused. I am sorry, Brian. I know this is a lot to process. Brian was staring at his phone like it was a foreign object. Then something in him broke. Not gently, but catastrophically. He made a sound that was half sob, half gasp, and his knees gave out. He sat down hard on the kitchen floor, his back against the cabinets, and started to cry. Not quiet tears, but deep, body-shaking sobs that came from somewhere primal. I got down on the floor next to him, something my 67-year-old knees protested, and I put my arm around his shoulders. He collapsed against me like he used to when he was small and had nightmares. Donald was still on the phone, saying something about legal options and protective measures, but I was not listening anymore. I was just holding my son while he fell apart, and for the first time since this whole thing started, I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake, because yes, I had protected his assets, but at what cost to his heart? The next morning arrived too quickly. I had not slept, had stayed up with Brian until he finally exhausted himself around 4 and dozed off on the couch. I covered him with Martha's favorite quilt and sat in the armchair across from him, watching him sleep, watching his face twitch with whatever nightmares were playing behind his closed eyes. At 7, I got up and made breakfast. Eggs, toast, coffee. Simple food, the kind Martha used to make when things were hard. The smell woke Brian. He sat up slowly, disoriented, then remembered where he was and why. His face crumpled for a moment before he caught himself. We need a plan, I said, handing him a mug of coffee. Stephanie is going to fight back. People like her always do. He took the coffee but did not drink it, just held it like he needed something to anchor his hands. Let her. I do not care anymore. I just want this to be over. Yes, you do care. And you should. Because this is not just about protecting money or pride. This is about protecting your future. She knows things about you, about us, about our family. If we do not control this narrative, she will. He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something I had not seen in months. A spark of anger. Not the defensive, protective anger he had shown when I first tried to warn him about Stephanie. This was different. Righteous. Focused. What do? We go on offense. By noon, Stephanie had fired her first shot. Brian's phone started blowing up with notifications, friends tagging him in a post, his colleague from school calling him frantically. I took his phone and watched the video Stephanie had posted on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. She was sitting on a bed, mascara running down her face, looking devastated. The performance was impressive, I had to admit. I do not normally do this, she said to the camera, her voice breaking. But I need people to know the truth. I just escaped an emotionally abusive situation. My husband and his father have been systematically trying to control and manipulate me. The father, Claude, set up an elaborate trap to humiliate me, to make me look like a bad person. He planted fake evidence. He installed cameras in his house, without telling anyone, and used them to record me without my consent. When I discovered what he had done, when I tried to defend myself, my husband turned on me completely. She wiped her eyes. I am scared. I do not know what they might do next. If anything happens to me, I want people to know the truth. The video had 300,000 views in 6 hours. The comments were split. Half were supportive, outraged on her behalf. Half were skeptical, pointing out inconsistencies in her story. But the damage was done. Several of Brian's colleagues had already seen it. His principal, Dr. Helena Grant, called him directly. "Brian, I do not know what is happening, but parents are calling the school. There is a video circulating. I think you need to take some time off until this settles down." Brian hung up and looked at me. "She is trying to destroy my reputation, my career, everything." His voice was flat, shocked. "Yes," I said, "because she has nothing left to lose. But we have something she does not have." "What?" "The truth, and evidence to prove it." I called Donald Shaw. "We need to move now," I told him. "Today," he agreed. We spent the next 3 hours compiling everything. The videos of Stephanie breaking into my house, the audio of her phone calls. Gerald Porter had agreed to provide a written statement about what she had done to him. Most importantly, Donald contacted the IRS agent handling Stephanie's case, a woman named Patricia Flores. She was very interested in what we had. "If she committed fraud within a marriage," Agent Flores said during a conference call, "that adds several federal charges to our existing case. Marriage fraud, identity fraud, wire fraud. If she used electronic communications. Can you document everything?" "We can, and we will," Donald told her. While we were building our case, something unexpected happened. Gerald Porter, Stephanie's ex, posted his own video in response to hers. "I saw Stephanie Turner's post about being abused," he said, sitting in what looked like his living room, calm and composed. "I want to share my experience with her." He detailed everything. How she had moved in with him, convinced him to add her to his house title, then broke off the engagement and extorted $250,000 from him. "I lost my home because of her. I lost my savings. I almost lost my practice because I was so financially devastated. If the Henderson family is fighting back against her, I support them completely." His video went viral faster than hers. Within hours, 2 other men came forward. One was Marcus Wright, the real estate developer. He told a similar story. The other was a man named Tony Castellano, someone we did not even know about. He posted a video saying Stephanie had catfished him online, convinced him he was in a long-distance relationship with her, and gotten him to send her $40,000 over 8 months for various fabricated emergencies. The narrative was flipping. The comments on Stephanie's video changed. People were calling her a con artist, a scammer. Some were angry they had believed her initially. Brian watched all of this unfold on his laptop, his face unreadable. Finally, he looked at me. "I am not the first. I will not be the last unless someone stops her." He stood up, squared his shoulders. "I want to press charges. For everything. The break-in, the property destruction, all of it. And I want to cooperate with the IRS investigation. She needs to face real consequences." "Are you sure?" I asked. "This is going to get ugly. Uglier than it already is." "I am sure." He met my eyes. "You taught me something, Dad. You taught me that protecting yourself is not the same as being cruel. She made her choices. Now, she gets to live with them." We met with a divorce attorney that afternoon, a sharp woman named Jennifer Hayes, who had been recommended by Donald. After Brian explained everything, Jennifer leaned back in her chair and smiled grimly. "In Ohio, we can file for annulment based on fraud. If we can prove she married you under false pretenses with intent to defraud, the marriage gets erased legally, like it never existed." "Is that possible?" Brian asked. "With what you have?" "Absolutely. She never intended to be a real wife. She intended to position herself for financial gain through your father. That is textbook fraud." We filed the paperwork that day. 2 days later, Stephanie made her final desperate move. She showed up at Westbrook High School at 3:15, right when classes were ending. Students were everywhere, heading to buses and cars. She stood in the parking lot and started yelling, "Brian Henderson! I know you are in there. You cannot hide from me. We need to talk." Brian was in his classroom, grading papers. A student ran in. "Mr. Henderson, your wife is outside screaming for you." Another teacher, a man named Paul Garrett, went out to try to calm her down. "Mom, this is a school. You need to leave." She ignored him, kept yelling. School security, 2 older men who usually just monitored the parking lot, approached her. She turned on them. "Do not touch me. I am here to see my husband. This is harassment." Someone called the police. 2 officers arrived within 10 minutes. One of them, Officer David Grant, recognized Stephanie's name immediately from the restraining order that had been filed 2 days earlier. "Mom, you are in violation of a protective order." You are not allowed within 500 feet of Brian Henderson. She tried to argue, but he was not interested. You need to come with us. She was arrested in front of 30 students, their phones out, recording everything. The videos were online within an hour. Brian watched one of them in my kitchen that evening, his face pale. She is completely unraveling. Part of him, I could tell, felt guilty. The part that had loved her, or thought he had, but most of him just looked tired. When is this going to end? Soon, I told him. Very soon. That night, Stephanie used her one phone call from the county jail to call her friend Amanda, the one she had been coordinating with. The call was recorded, like all jail calls are. Amanda did not answer. Stephanie tried 3 times. Finally, a text came through, and the police read it to her. Sorry, cannot help. FBI showed up at my door this morning asking about you. Getting a lawyer, do not contact me again. Stephanie sat in that holding cell, alone, every bridge burned, every scheme exposed, and for the first time in years, she had to face consequences with nobody to manipulate into saving her. Brian and I drove to the cemetery that evening. We stood at Martha's grave as the sun set. Brian had not been here in months. I come every week, but he had been avoiding it. Mom would have seen through her in 5 minutes, he said quietly. Your mother had a gift for reading people. She could spot a phony from across a room. I miss her, he said. Every day. Me too, son. Every single day. We stood in silence, and I thought about how much Martha would have hated all of this. She would have wanted to protect Brian, but she would have done it differently than I did. More gently, maybe, with more faith in people's capacity for goodness. I had lost some of that when I lost her. But standing there with my son, watching him slowly find his way back to himself, I thought maybe my way had been necessary. Sometimes love is not gentle. Sometimes it is building a trap and waiting for someone to walk into it, just to prove they are who you fear they are. 3 months passed. The legal machinery ground forward slowly but inevitably. Stephanie accepted a plea deal on the IRS charges rather than go to trial. 3 years probation, full restitution to her victims, and 600 hours of community service. She also agreed to an uncontested annulment of her marriage to Brian in exchange for reduced charges on the breaking and entering. Brian's marriage was legally erased. In the eyes of the law, it had never existed. He was also ordered to pay for the damaged lock, $875, which she had to set up a payment plan for because she had no savings left after paying her lawyer. She moved back to Indiana to live with family. All her social media accounts were deleted or locked. She simply vanished from our lives like she had never been there, except for the scars she left behind. Brian took a semester sabbatical from teaching. Dr. Grant, the principal, supported the decision. Take time to heal, she told him. Your classroom will be here when you are ready. He spent those months in therapy with a woman named Dr. Linda Walsh, unpacking not just what Stephanie had done but why he had been vulnerable to her in the first place. One evening, about 2 months into his sabbatical, he came over for dinner. We had fallen back into our old routine, Sunday dinners at my house. I made pot roast again, trying to get Martha's recipe right. I could never quite match hers, but I kept trying. As we ate, Brian said, Dr. Walsh asked me something this week that I could not answer. What did she ask? She asked if I was angry at you for the way you handled everything. He looked at me directly. Are you? I am not sure, he said slowly. I understand why you did it. I even think you were probably right. But part of me wishes you had just let me figure it out on my own, even if it took longer or cost more. I sat with that for a moment. I can understand that. I took away your agency in some ways. I made decisions for you. Yes, he said. But then he smiled, just a little. But you also saved me from making an even worse mistake. If I had found out the truth after a year, or 2 years, or after we had kids, his face went pale at the thought. So I do not know if I am angry or grateful, maybe both. That seems fair, I told him. We sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Brian said, I have been thinking about Mom a lot, about how she used to decorate the basement with all those holiday decorations. I never told you this, but when I was a teenager, I figured out why you really kept it locked. It was not about dangerous equipment, it was because you could not handle seeing her things every day. I looked at him, surprised. You knew? I figured it out eventually. After she died, I understood grief better. I understood wanting to keep parts of someone locked away where they could not hurt you every time you saw them. He paused. But you let them out. You emptied that basement for me. To protect me. That could not have been easy. He was right. Moving Martha's decorations out of that basement, dismantling her careful collection, had been one of the hardest things I had done. But I had needed the space for my plan, and her things had been the sacrifice. It was worth it, I said. You are worth it. The semester ended. Brian went back to teaching in January. His students welcomed him back with cards and a cake that said, "Welcome home, Mr. H." His colleagues treated him normally, professionally, without pity or awkward questions. Life slowly returned to a kind of normalcy. Then, in early March, something unexpected happened. Brian mentioned he had met someone. "Her name is Sarah Grant," he said over coffee at a diner near the school. "She is a librarian at Westbrook. We have been talking for a few weeks." I felt my chest tighten with protective fear. "Are you sure you are ready?" "I do not know," he admitted. "But I like her, Dad. She is different. She is quiet. Funny. She loves terrible puns. She drives a beat-up truck and has 2 rescue dogs she treats like her children. Bring her by for dinner," I said. "I would like to meet her." The following Sunday, Brian showed up with Sarah Grant. She was not what I expected. No polished appearance. No designer clothes. She wore jeans and a sweater. Her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She had an easy smile and shook my hand firmly. "Mr. Henderson, it is nice to finally meet you. Brian talks about you constantly." "Call me Claude," I said. "Please." Over dinner, I watched her carefully, not obviously, but I was looking for signs, for red flags, for the tells Stephanie had shown. But Sarah was simply present. She asked me about my engineering career, seemed genuinely interested in the bridges I had designed. She talked about her work as a librarian, how she ran a reading program for struggling students. She mentioned her dogs, Max and Daisy, with the kind of affection that seemed authentic. Halfway through the meal, she said something that caught my attention. "Brian told me about what happened with his ex. I wanted you to know I appreciate him being honest about it. That takes courage." I Googled him after he first asked me out. I saw some of the social media posts from last year. I almost said no to the date because I thought there might be drama. "What changed your mind?" I asked. "I talked to some teachers at school. Every single person said Brian was the most genuine, decent human they knew. So, I figured I would give him a chance." She looked at Brian and smiled. "Best decision I made all year." After dinner, she insisted on helping with dishes. She asked about Martha, about our marriage, about my life. She did not ask about finances or property or inheritance. She asked about the things that mattered. When they were leaving, she hugged me, not a polite, obligatory hug, but a real one. "Thank you for dinner, Claude." Brian was not kidding when he said, "You make the best pot roast in Columbus." After they left, I sat on my back porch and realized I liked her. Really liked her. She looked me in the eye when she talked. That is rare. Over the next few months, Brian and Sarah became more serious. I watched them together when they came for Sunday dinners. There was an ease between them, a lack of performance. She teased him about his terrible taste in music. He groaned at her puns, which were indeed terrible. They were building something slowly, carefully, honestly. One Sunday in June, as we were finishing dessert, Brian said, "Dad, I have a question. The will you made, the one that said I would not inherit if I was married, is that still in effect?" I set down my coffee cup. "No. I changed it back the day Stephanie was arrested. But I did keep one provision." "What is that?" "Half of everything goes to the Martha Henderson Memorial Scholarship Fund, no matter what. Your mother would have wanted that. She believed in helping people build better lives, especially people from difficult circumstances. It felt right to honor that." Brian nodded, his eyes a little wet. "That is perfect, Dad. She would love that." Sarah reached over and squeezed Brian's hand. "I think that is beautiful. My mom was a single parent who worked 2 jobs to put me through college. Scholarships saved my life. This would have helped someone like me." And that is when I knew. She was not Stephanie. She was not interested in what Brian could give her, or what I might leave behind. She was interested in Brian, in the life they could build together, in being part of something real. A year after Brian's annulment was finalized, he called me on a Tuesday evening in April. "Dad, can you come over to my apartment? I need to talk to you about something." His voice was nervous, excited. I drove over immediately, my mind running through possibilities. He opened the door with Sarah standing next to him, both of them grinning like kids with a secret. "What is going on?" I asked. Brian pulled a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it. There was a ring inside, simple and elegant. "I am going to propose," he said. "But I wanted to ask you first. Not for permission, exactly, but for your blessing. I want to make sure you are okay with this." I looked at Sarah, who was watching me with a mixture of hope and nervousness. "Do you love my son?" I asked her directly. "Yes," she said without hesitation. "More than I thought I could love anyone." "Do you see him as a person or as a provider?" "As a person. As a partner. As someone I want to build a life with, whatever that life looks like. Then you have my blessing. Both of you." They hugged me, and Sarah started crying happy tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for protecting him so he could be here for me." They got engaged a week later. She said yes immediately, laughing and crying at the same time. The wedding was small, just close friends and family, in the backyard of my house in late September. Sarah's mother flew in from Arizona. Her 2 rescue dogs, Max and Daisy, were part of the ceremony, wearing little bow ties that Sarah had made for them. It was simple, joyful, real. During the reception, I stood to give a toast. "I am not good at speeches," I began, and people laughed. "But I want to say something about love and time. When you are young, love feels urgent, like something you need to grab quickly before it disappears. As you get older, you realize real love is patient. It waits. It builds slowly. It proves itself through small, consistent actions, not grand gestures." I looked at Brian and Sarah, holding hands at their table. "My son learned a hard lesson about what love is not. Someone who sees you as a transaction is not loving you, they are using you. But he also learned what love is. Sarah, you see my son? You see who he really is, not who you want him to be or what he can provide. That is the foundation of something lasting." I raised my glass. "To Brian and Sarah, may your love be patient, honest, and built to last." Everyone drank, and Martha's favorite song started playing. Sarah pulled Brian onto the makeshift dance floor in my backyard, and they swayed together under string lights we had hung from the trees. I watched them and thought about Martha, about how she would have loved this moment, loved Sarah, loved seeing our son happy and whole. After the wedding, life settled into a comfortable rhythm. Brian and Sarah bought a small house 3 miles from mine. They adopted a 3rd dog, a scraggly mutt named Charlie who was missing one eye and had the worst breath I had ever encountered. Sarah started a book club that met at their house every month. Brian coached the high school science Olympiad team. They came for Sunday dinners religiously, sometimes bringing friends, sometimes just the 2 of them and their dogs. One Sunday in November, almost 2 years after everything with Stephanie had ended, we were sitting on my back porch after dinner. The leaves were turning, the air cooling. Brian said, "I have been thinking about the basement. About what you did." He paused. "Dr. Walsh helped me understand something. You did not set a trap for Stephanie. You set a test. You gave her a choice. She could have respected your boundaries and your home. She chose to break in. That was on her, not you." "I appreciate you saying that," I told him. "But there is something else," he continued. "The basement was never really about Stephanie, was it? It was about teaching me something, about trust and patience and not rushing into things. You kept that door locked my whole childhood, not to hide anything valuable, but to teach me that some spaces are private. Some things require time and trust to access." "You are giving me too much credit," I said. "I just did not want you breaking your mother's Christmas lights." He laughed. "Maybe, but I learned something anyway. I learned that love should not require you to break down doors. Real love waits for you to be ready to open them." Sarah came out onto the porch then, carrying 3 mugs of hot chocolate. She handed one to each of us and settled into the chair next to Brian. "What are you 2 talking about so seriously?" "Basements," Brian said, "and lessons, and love." She smiled. "My 3 favorite topics." We sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set through the bare branches of the oak trees in my backyard. As I watched them together, I thought about everything that had happened. The pain, the betrayal, the careful plan I had executed. People might say I was cruel, manipulative, controlling. Maybe I was, but I also saved my son from years of misery with someone who saw him as a means to an end. I gave him the chance to find someone who saw him as a whole person. The basement is empty now. No more locks, electronic or otherwise. No more cameras or traps or tests. Just space for storage, exactly like it was always meant to be. Sometimes Brian and Sarah use it to store their camping gear or holiday decorations. The door stays open most of the time. But the lesson remains. Some doors should stay locked until you are sure who is trying to open them. Some people will reveal exactly who they are if you give them the opportunity. And sometimes protecting someone you love requires difficult choices, uncomfortable truths, and the willingness to be seen as the villain in someone else's story. Stephanie taught Brian what love is not. Martha, even in death, taught him what love is. And Sarah is showing him how to build it day by day, in small moments, with patience and honesty. That is all a father can ask for. To see his son happy, healed, and loved by someone who truly sees him. To know that the hard choices were worth it. To watch him build the kind of life Martha and I always hoped he would have. The basement door is open now. But Brian knows when to keep other doors closed, when to wait, when to test, when to trust. He learned those lessons the hard way, through pain and betrayal, and the slow process of healing. But he learned them. And that makes all the difference. I am 67 years old now. I have been an engineer, a husband, a widower, and a father. I have built bridges that will stand for 100 years, and relationships that were meant to last forever. Some did, some did not. But I learned that protecting what matters most sometimes requires you to build traps instead of bridges, to test instead of trust, to act instead of hope. Was I right to do what I did? I still do not know for certain, but my son is happy, genuinely happy, for the first time in years. He has a wife who loves him for who he is. He has a life that is his own, built on honest foundations, and he has the tools to protect himself from people who would use him. That, in the end, is all any parent can hope to give their child. The tools to survive, the wisdom to choose well, and the courage to walk away from what is hurting them. The basement is just a basement now. But it served its purpose. It taught us all what we needed to learn. And sometimes, that is enough. Now I want to ask you something. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect someone you love, even if it meant they might not understand or forgive you right away? How did you know it was the right thing to do? Share your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and I think we can all learn from each other's experiences about love, trust, and family. If this story resonated with you, if it made you think or feel something, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories. And if you want to hear more about life's difficult lessons, about family, betrayal, and finding your way back to yourself, please subscribe to this channel. I share a new story every week, and I would love to have you as part of this community. Share this video with someone who might need to hear it. Maybe someone who is struggling with trust, or someone who has been hurt and is trying to heal, or someone who needs to know that protecting yourself is not selfish. It is necessary. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here, for taking the time to sit with me through this difficult journey. I hope you take away something meaningful, something that helps you in your own life. Until next time, protect your heart, trust carefully, and remember that real love never asks you to break down doors. It waits for you to open them. Take care of yourselves,